Welcome everyone to the Pick Six podcast, where we discuss the biggest stories in college football. I'm your host, Chris Cheng, and joining me as always is my co-host, Rudy Tamarchio. Rudy, everyone else, happy FSU rivalry week. It feels like Christmas, my man. How's your week been so far?
It feels like Christmas because it's starting to get cold here in St. Louis on my week-long trip. Thankfully, I'll be back in time for Florida State. This is my last night. This will be the last podcast with this like weird jerry-rig setup. Thank you for helping me get it together. My hands might look enormous, but hey, we're going to make do.
Listen, we're making it happen no matter whether you're on the road or whether you're in Miami. We want to make sure we're bringing this stuff to all the viewers. And so, I was thinking about it. I was like, where do we start with this, right? Do we talk about the game? Do we talk about, so I was like, let's dive into a little bit of the history of this incredible rivalry. And in my opinion, it is, and you and I both went to UM. You grew up in South Florida too, right?
Sure did. My
Yeah.
first
So
Miami
like,
game was like E6 with the Citadel. Yeah.
yeah. So like, I feel like you, like me, we just grew up hating FSU. Like it to me, I just remember always playing like football, like pickup football, and like one team would always be UM and one team would always be FSU because there was always some kid that had like a dad who went to FSU or a parent or a brother that went to FSU, and then we would always rep UM. And it's like ever since I can remember, like probably 6 years old, my earliest memory of that rivalry, and just it just being this utter hatred, and in the most positive way that you can use the word hatred. But like you just, if you cheered for FSU, you hated orange and green. If you cheered for UM, you hated that garnet and gold. Like it was just unmistakable, and there was always trash talking. And I feel like you and I, growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, we got to see the rivalry at its peak. I mean, this was blockbuster almost every year from the late 80s up until mid 90s, and then it got interesting again in the late 90s, early 2000s. Um and so to me, it's the best rivalry in college football. I know there's a lot of other great rivalries out there. The Iron Bowl with Auburn and Alabama. You have the Red River Shootout, which we just got to see another edition of with Texas and Oklahoma. You have the big game with, or the game as they call it, which whatever, but Michigan and OSU. But to me, rivalry week always is the week that we play FSU. So just to let you guys know, if you're unfamiliar with the rivalry, there's been a total of 68 meetings. Miami leads the series 35-33. The largest margin of victories, which is actually interesting, is 47-0 by both teams. FSU did it in 97. Miami did it in 1976. So I thought that was an interesting thing, which I think on Saturday we're going to break that, but we'll talk more about that later. Rudy, let's talk about first, what are you expecting on Saturday, atmosphere wise? What do you think Miami Gardens, the Hard Rock, is going to be like?
Should be interesting because FSU obviously travels really well for this game, given
Always.
the number of Florida fans and alumni and stuff like that in Miami. However, with the team being as abysmal as it is, I'm sure there's still going to be a good contingent of fans. I'm sure I think they're bringing their band. Like I'm assuming they will. I don't remember if they actually allocated for it. It's one of those things like if you don't hear it in the news, you just wait to see a section like cordoned off, and oh, okay, they're going to be up there in the upper
Yeah.
deck. But yeah, they're going to travel really well. Uh, Maybe not as good as like the past couple of years, but there'll still
Yeah.
be enough annoying Florida State to make it happen. Look, this is a game that Miami has had circled on their calendar since last year. It's something that Mario Cristobal has had circled on his calendar because if you go back and see some of the quotes from when Miami got blown out his first year in 2022,
Yep.
saying, "Yeah, well, look, that's football, but at some point the shoe's going to be on the other foot." And if
Yeah.
you know what, we'll even let's play a little conspiracy theory. Maybe Miami has struggled so badly against Virginia Tech, Cal, and Louisville because they've been watching nothing but Florida State film for 3 straight weeks, saying, "Look, we'll find a way to get by. Yeah, this team is 1-6. We want to make them 1-7. We want to do it in the worst way possible. So we're going to just put all of our eggs in this basket."
Yeah, it's gonna be. I think the Rock is gonna be electric. I mean, it's been. I mean, the last night game we had was amazing. That was the Virginia Tech game. That was right. That was the Virginia Tech game, which was amazing. I think it's gonna. I think it will be comparable to the Notre Dame game from a few years back. We call it the Bandyversary in our group chat, where Bandy had that sick pick six.
That's a great game.
And
That
so I,
and Virginia Tech for it, where Miami were all black in that one too.
yeah, and so I'm expecting. that place to be packed out 100%. I mean, what's going to be interesting, and I don't think I've ever seen this number before, but there's supposed to be 130 recruits, 80 plus blue chippers, and several who will
Yeah.
be flip targets for Mario Cristobal, who are going to other programs that we'll hopefully be competing with in the college football playoff. Another great thing about it is it's homecoming. I think this is the second year in a row. Last time we played them when they blew us out, we played them for homecoming. Hopefully we can get revenge
Yep.
this year for homecoming. I'm excited about that. Will you be on campus tomorrow for the boat burning?
I won't get there in time. My flight doesn't land until like late at night. So I'm just hoping nothing happens to my flight, so I don't have to worry about like finding a way to get into Miami first thing in the morning. So my first taste is going to be getting out there and tailgating, and then I'll be on the field for the fourth quarter, so that'll be fun. All of our
Yeah.
former Sebastians have a reunion, and then we'll be out there for the fourth quarter, which will be fun.
Yeah, and again, I just want to remind everyone, Rudy is not only a alum like myself, he is a former Sebastian. So we're going to get into in a few minutes talking about some of our favorite memories. But I just want to say I'm a terrible alum. I have never, no, excuse me, 1 year. I went to one boat burning and I have not been to one since, but it's been hard the past couple of years with 3 kids. So hopefully I get there. But speaking of memories, Rudy, again, you've been Sebastian, you've traveled too for the games. So you've been to
Oh
Dope.
yeah, I won a
Let's
game up there in Tallahassee.
Yeah. So what are some of your favorite memories of this rivalry?
In this rivalry. I mean, there's been some. I've been happy to go. Like my first experience in this rivalry as like a fan was the 2002 wide left game. That game was absolute insanity. I went with my one of my best friends. The reason why I'm a Miami Hurricanes fan is because of his season tickets. So we got to sit like 45-yard line, Miami Hurricanes bench. We saw Jay-Z walk in the sidelines. The stadium ran out of water at halftime, and it was one of those like noon October games. It was October 12th, 2002. By the way, also a homecoming game for Miami, which I thought was wild given the circumstances for the rivalry. The angle to we didn't even know that the kick was in or out until we watched the Miami sideline celebrate, because from our angle we couldn't tell whether the kick was good or not, which was insane. And then as a Sebastian, the first time we met Chris was in the Orange Bowl as students. You were
Yes.
sitting in the row right in front of that 2004 game, which the score didn't indicate just how exciting it was because it was like a
No.
16-10 win in overtime. But to rally and score a touchdown in the closing seconds of that game, that sonorous Moss, like inside screen, that was a wonderful play. Our MO for beating Florida State back in those years were screen passes late in the game.
Yep.
2002 was 68-yard screen pass to Willis McGahee from Ken Dorsey. And then the overtime playing out the way that it did, Frank Gore scoring his touchdown was great. And then probably my favorite Sebastian moment was 2007. Not a great year for Miami Hurricanes football, not a great year
No.
for Florida State football, but we came back, won that game. Everyone was thinking as we because Kyle Wright got hurt in that game, like
Yep.
throwing like somewhere like at halftime, whatever it was, like it's somewhere in the like early in the second half. Kirby Freeman comes in, throws this amazing touchdown. He gets hurt, so Kyle has to come back in on like a bum ankle because Kirby had his like rib broken or something like that when it happened. So we score with like maybe a minute something to go, and all we're thinking of is it's going to come down to a kick again, isn't it? Great, just our luck. First play with Florida State's possession is a fumble recovered by Colin McCarthy, and he runs it in for a touchdown to seal it.
Oh, Colin
Never been.
McCarthy.
Yeah, that was a great game. It was so good that we decided to not win another game that year.
Yeah.
That's how great that was.
I don't like to
Number
talk about
five.
that. That was the year I
Yeah, that was
graduated. That
number
was a
five.
rough year.
Yeah, yeah. We went 5-7, and I forget who we played the game immediately after that. I don't know if it was like Virginia Tech on the road, and then we, sent the Orange Bowl out in the worst fashion possible against Virginia in the
Oh,
last game, which I don't want to talk about. But
no.
yeah, that was how good that win was against FSU. We didn't want to win another one.
Yeah, it was brutal. I have to say for me, I mean, my wife will kill me if I don't say the 2006 game because that's where we met. I was completely belligerent. Yeah. Um, it was that was a great game. We didn't win, but it was a great game. But for me, there's 2 games that stick out for me, and they're great because the first one's a 2003 game. I was a freshman at FSU. I was rushing a frat, and we had these fraternity shirts, right, that we had to wear, but I wore a UM shirt underneath it, right? And that was the year it was pouring rain. And so like by halftime, you could see the U logo underneath my shirt bleeding through my fraternity shirt. And luckily the next year I entered the transfer portal myself and finished my college career at UM. And then I would say the second great memory I have at the UM game was that my first game as a student at UM in 2004. It was also very memorable. We had the erector set risers in the east end zone, which we would always bring out for the big games, so like for most games, if we were playing like Rutgers or Temple or whatever, the east end zone was always open. But for FSU in the really big games, we would erect these extra stands so we could make more room for fans, and that place would get ridiculous. And I just remember that being a defensive battle. And going into halftime, we were down 10-0, and I was like, man, are we really going to lose? Because that was a year also we played FSU 3 times in like a 12-month period, less actually. We had played them the 2003 game in the rain that was pouring in Tallahassee. Then we played them in the Orange Bowl that year, beat them again. And then we played this 2004 game. And then I just remember going into halftime at 10-0, and like I was like, we cannot lose this game as a UM student. Like as my first game, I was like, I can't lose this. And then, a young Devin Hester makes a crucial field goal block with 4 minutes left and gives us a shot at tying the game. And Sonoris Moss makes this ridiculous score with 30 seconds left in the game where he kind of cuts inside, and I'm just like, what are you doing? I'm like, why would you cut inside with like this little of time left? But he scrambles out to the outside and like sneaks in, and then Chris Ricks does Chris Ricks things. If those of you who are too young to remember, FSU actually used to have a shirt that used to instead of saying, happens, it was Ricks happens. And that was one of my favorite shirts because Chris Ricks fumbles the ball in OT. We recover it. And then Frankie G just ran it in. And I just remembered that place like erupting. It was just like, that was the thing I miss about the Orange Bowl. Like you could feel like the structure shake. It was so incredible. It was such a like I'm glad we got to experience that as students. So that was like those are like some of my favorite memories from UM games. I love Chris Ricks. He's my favorite FSU player of all time, hands down, by far. Just the fact also that like that I vividly remember the shirt where it would say Ricks happens, and I just thought that was the funniest thing, and I was just like, this is amazing. But enough. Well, actually, what is your worst memory? Let's talk about like on the inverse of that. What game is like you're like, I wish we could just erase that game out of history.
It's more of like the real heartbreaking moments, at least that I remember. I would love to have that 2005 game back up there in Tallahassee that ended on a botched, field goal attempt where
Mm-hmm.
like the snap just didn't get held right and the kick didn't even go off. Like it was that badly handled because the snap was off. We should have won that game going away because there were so many pass interference penalties because Kyle Wright was actually throwing accurately downfield, but the FSU defensive backs are doing a smart thing. They're like, look, we're going to keep points off the board by just, annihilating these receivers where they have a chance to catch the ball. And it was another one of those like just offensive struggles. So I'd love to have that one back because that was probably one of the beginning of the end in terms of a good run for Miami Hurricanes football in the early 2000s. And you can kind of see that as like the beginning of the mistakes. I would love to take back that blowout 2 years ago. And I'll even say, if I have to pick another game, it would be the 2016 Miami game where we were an extra point away from tying and we had it blocked.
Yeah, the block of the rock,
Where it
right?
was like that beautiful AC Coley like corner route, the back of the end zone.
Yep.
And yeah, that block. I mean, we could have put an end to that Florida State team. They wouldn't have made it to the college football playoff and gotten knocked out by Oregon in embarrassing
Yeah.
fashion. We could have kept all happening, and maybe we would have had even more momentum in that year.
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, it's always going to be the 2010 game, where we got blown out also. It was actually the only time at Hard Rock where I actually sat in the upper deck. And that was the year that, I don't know who decided this, but they decided to split the FSU fan base into the four corners as opposed to putting them like in the one area on the lower bowl and up. And bro, I got jumped by 9 FSU fans and ended up in the hospital that night. And I was just like, I mean, it's just such a tragic because I went into that game feeling so confident. I was like, yeah, we're gonna win. And it took a downward spiral fast, like super fast. And then I got into a fight eight of his friends jumped in. Next thing I know, I'm waking up in a pool of blood, lips, face busted open, broke my nose. I was just both team and myself got our asses kicked, and it was just not fun. So that was worse. Yeah, it was brutal, brutal, brutal. But enough of the past. Let's talk about this weekend coming up. We're rocking these amazing black unis. Have you seen these yet, Rudy?
Miami Knights, like what, 4.0? Yeah, they're look, I'm one of those guys where like I don't care what the uniform is as long as we win it. The
Win.
best looking Miami uniform is the one that we win.
Amen.
I like traditional like garb and matchups like that. Like I want to see looking back at like other traditional matchups, like when you see USC and UCLA, I was so happy when they finally went back to both teams wearing their home
I
uniforms against
love
each other.
that.
So
Yes.
like USC's got the red and the gold pants, and then UCLA is wearing that powder blue with the gold pants. I want to see Miami wear the orange top with the white pants, and seeing Florida State with like the white top and the gold pants on the at home, and then we go on the road. Like we can wear any combination of white and orange pants or the all whites against their garnet and gold. But look, it's a new generation. It's new kids. They get to pick what they want to wear. Big time atmosphere. Miami's offensively clicking on all cylinders. Those will be my favorite uniforms if we beat FSU by like 70.
Yeah, I think, listen, I would prefer to have the traditional uniforms on, the orange tops and the white bottoms, with black cleats. I am not a fan of white cleats. It's black socks, black cleats. That's Bible. Um, but I do love I'm a big fan of all black. As you can see, I love all black. If this is kind of like my thing this year. I'm wearing all black as much as I can, and I'm just waiting for someone to be like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "I'm great. This is just my favorite color combo, all black." But like you, I'm the same thing. I'm just like, as long as we're winning, I don't care what I don't care if we wear clown uniforms. Actually, I would love us to wear clown uniforms and then beat them by 60. That would, I mean, whatever it takes. I'm down for it. But let's actually talk about the actual game, Rudy. I think both you and I kind of understand this is going to be a lopsided affair, not because of the 21-point differential, but because ESPN players to watch. This is who they're telling everyone to keep an eye out for this game. FSU, it's their punter, and for Miami, it is Cam Ward. And whenever you're comparing FSU's punter to our Cam Ward, it's gonna be a blowout. It's gonna be a bloodbath. So, and I'm not saying that like as a homer, like just to let you guys know, like FSU is tied for 89th in passing yards, averaging passing yards. They're 131st in rushing yards and then 133rd in points, which basically means they are scraping the bottom of the barrel, and they're tied for second worst in turnover margin, which if you guys didn't see the Duke game, there were literally 3 straight drives where they turned the ball over. So this is a really,
On three plays.
yeah, 3 consecutive plays, which is a really,
Yeah.
really bad thing. And so I think we know this there couldn't be a bigger mismatch in terms of rivalries this season. I mean, even Oklahoma, we didn't know how bad they were going to be, but I thought people thought that Oklahoma would give Texas a run for their money. I mean, Auburn always plays Alabama pretty decent for at least a half, and then you go down the list of people and rivalries that go through, but this is very unique in the sense that no one. I mean, when I tell you I have poured over easily like 2 to 3 hours of podcasts and interviews, and there is not a single person who watches sports who's giving, even Locked On FSU and the FSU war chant or war channel, whatever the hell they're called. Even they're like,
Yeah.
this is going to be a blowout. This is going to be a bloodbath. But I think one particular area that's going to be interesting will be FSU's wide receivers versus Miami secondary, because that's going to be the Timmy Jimmy fight. Because we can't defend anyone and they can't catch a ball if their lives depended on it.
I love how good you are at fitting in a Timmy Jimmy reference in every single episode.
It's my
Like we
goal,
almost need
bro.
to point be like, if we can fit in multiple Timmy Jimmy fight references in an episode, we're doing our job.
And if you guys don't know
But
what Timmy versus Jimmy is, please go look that up. Look up South Park Timmy versus Jimmy.
South
It is one of the
it's
greatest
incredible.
episodes. It's definitely on the Mount Rushmore with like World of Warcraft for South Park episodes. Like it is
Yeah.
just amazing. It's a great episode. So, Rudy, what do you think? Let's just create some hypotheticals, because I think again we both know this is going to be a bloodbath. How does FSU keep it competitive, or how do they potentially win?
They're going to have to completely recreate the Cal game and the
Yeah.
Virginia Tech game combined. So they would
Yeah.
need that defense that in the preseason had a lot of hype in terms of being one of the best front fours in the country to actually start playing like it. Which they would also need some help from defensive backs because, that was the big mismatch in the Virginia Tech, game that really helped Virginia Tech in terms of
Yep.
taking advantage of some struggles on Miami's offense for part of like mostly the first half in
Hmm.
terms of just sitting on short routes and, playing some really great defense. So they would need that to happen. And they need to come with such a great game plan in terms of getting the ball out quickly and having their two rotating, revolving quarterbacks. One's a redshirt freshman, the other one's a true freshman, who both look like deer in the headlights with
Oh, poor
really, really
things.
bad offensive line. But hey, Cal has statistically one of the worst offensive lines in the ACC, and they threw all over the place on Miami because they were able to get the ball out quickly and take advantage of a lot of miscommunication in the secondary. So if they can recreate that, Miami's been having trouble defensively to put it together for all four quarters. In some cases, they struggle to put it together for a full quarter, but they do enough to get one or two stops, which is all really Miami's offense really needs. So that's what they would have to do. That and burn a bunch of candles, make some Cam Ward voodoo dolls, and start putting pins in it. Hope that maybe someone other than Mike Norvell runs to practice. Because I don't know if
Yeah.
anyone else saw that clip of him like in his trainers
Sprinting.
in
Yep.
his work with the FSU logo as the O, like sprinting out, and his like punter and his kicker are just like, oh, here we go again. I'll just go kick a bunch of field goals because I'll be the only one putting up points ever if they can get me inside the 50.
I mean, their
But
punter, their
yeah,
punter is a goat. He is really, really good, and their kicker's not that bad.
yeah,
I mean, which you don't
no,
get to say.
field goal
Well,
kicker,
our
great.
generation doesn't get to say too much about FSU. I think what I'm keeping an eye out for is it's similar to what you're saying about utilizing what Virginia Tech and Cal did, which is utilizing screen passes, waggles, and sweeps, getting to the outside, getting their quarterback who is going to get chased down out of the pocket and moving because um, I think we haven't really been playing too much press, our cornerbacks. We've been playing a few yards off and then making the play off that, which is what's created, I think, some of these explosive plays. And so if FSU can get these really quick wide receiver screen passes, get the running back to dip out, you know, I think that's where they can get some yardage and kind of keep themselves in the game and keep their defense off the field. I don't think they're going to score a lot because I've already given you the stats. They're not good at scoring. But I think they also need to kind of give some unique formations for their wide receivers, maybe stack 2, 3 wide receivers, just do something very different that has not seen, that they have maybe not shown. I think they really need to open up their playbook. I mean, there is not a play that's out of bounds right now. You've got to use anything and everything, including trick plays, like whatever it is. I want to see the annexation of Puerto Rico. I want to see the Statue of Liberty. I want to see flea flickers, like their like play action pass. Like, I mean, they're going to need that. I think another key is utilizing their two massive tight ends. They have these two tight ends who are 6'6" and 6'3" and 240. And
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, if you get those guys out there, I mean, don't get me wrong, Kiko's about the same size, but I mean, Kiko hasn't been doing that well when it comes to one-on-one tackling. So in the last couple of games, so that kind of worries me. So I think if they can get those tight ends involved quickly, they can get these, again, run plays or quick action plays to the outside where you can kind of neutralize the Tyler Barons, the Ruben Baines, because that's where it really is going to be. It's, we know this. Our secondary is not good, but if Florida State can give themselves even just a second or two longer than what other teams have gotten, I think they can really kind of stay in this game. I don't think they're going to stay in the sense that they're going to make it competitive. I don't think this is going to be competitive whatsoever. But instead of losing by 21, maybe they lose by 14 or 17. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's realistically where they go with that. Do you have any score predictions, Rudy?
Oof, I hate giving score predictions, not because of anything of like it's all just bad juju for me. In
That's
terms of like
true.
if I give something but I'll give you one. I'll
Let's
give you
go.
one. Here's the thing. So you were talking about like scoring and like offense is like 133rd on that for FSU. They're the only team in FBS Division I college football to score 21 points or
That's the
less
most.
every game.
Yeah, they had the
They're
highest they've scored in any game is 21 points.
21. I'm going to be really embarrassed if Miami is a team that gives up more than 21 points to Florida State.
Oof, yeah.
So I'm going to give them 21. And I am hoping that it's going to be even worse than the score that I say it is. But I'm going to say it's going to be like 41-21. And I'm hoping that it's a hell of a lot worse. Because,
Yeah,
look, if you give Cam Ward only like 6 possessions, he's going to score touchdowns in all 6 possessions because it's just what he does. Like
yeah.
it's impossible to score every single drive, but he finds a way to just put points up on the board with his offense.
Yeah, I think for me, okay, so let me just say this to say this really quick. Just so like when we get back on Sunday and we talk about this wrap up, that like it's not like deer in headlights. So listen, I'm not going to sit here and say there's like zero chance that FSU is gonna win. There's always a chance, right, that FSU could win. I mean, this thing could go horribly for UM. I mean, we could see
Absolutely.
Cam Ward throwing pick six right off the rip. We could see an easy fumble off the 20, which could end up giving FSU the ball at the 10 or 15, which would be very similar to what happened to the Georgia Texas game, where Texas just could not get Georgia on their side of the field. It's just like Georgia kept playing on Texas's side of the field, and they just, even though their offense was semi inept, they just were able to score because they were starting at the Texas like 35 or midfield. And so if FSU's punter can keep them in the game like that, and they can play the field that way, I think FSU. That's how I think FSU wins this game. But again, it would require a fluke of Cam Ward having a sub, I would say 200-yard game. Like if Cam Ward's held to less than 200 and let's say 50 yards, 200 yards, I think it's probably going to be a loss. And if the rushing, because FSU does have a good D line. Let's not. That's the only saving grace of that team is their D line. So if they hold Damian Martinez and the rest of the gang to, I would say, under 200 yards also, yeah, I mean, I see FSU winning this. I mean, it's a possible, but again, it's going to require a lot of things to go their way. But, we are approaching the seventh game, or yeah, the seventh. We've finished 7 games, and Cam Ward is finally, I think, in my opinion, getting the respect he deserves. Ward is at the top of the Heisman odds this week following another win for Miami against Louisville. There's no question in my book that the Canes QB is putting up massive numbers. What do you think, Rudy, Cam Ward's chances are at winning the Heisman this year?
As long as Miami keeps winning, I think Cam Ward is the front runner because there is no player that is more, hinged on a team's success from their performance. And he's a great running back. He's putting up great running back numbers. But Cam Ward makes this Miami team move. He also inspires that defense to get the 1 or 2 stops when it's sorely, sorely needed. He puts up video game numbers. I know.
Yeah.
I don't know if you put up the graphic yet. You were telling me about
did.
like what the stats look like for Cam Ward versus all of the other quarterbacks who have won the Heisman through 6 games. He's blowing those stats out of the water. His completion percentage is great. He throws a hell of a lot more touchdowns than he has interceptions. Yeah, the picks look bad, but that's just what comes with Cam Ward. He may be digging himself a hole sometimes, but he's digging himself out of them. You were saying about he'd have to have like a really bad game to lose to Florida State. He could throw a pick 6. He's done it before, and Miami will still win the game. He may throw 2 pick 6s, and Miami can still win the game.
Oh yeah,
because as long as he gets the ball back, he's going to score. And it's going to be through the thing about him is that he's not just playing hero ball the entire time. Those plays make a lot of attention. Like we haven't really talked about it yet, but like that underarm pass in like the first drive or second drive against Louisville, we're all like, this guy Fletcher, is a psychopath.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, he's good for one of those a game.
Easily. I feel like I feel like we should just start creating Cam Ward bingo cards. Like he's got to dodge like 2 tackles, like he's got to dodge 2 sacks, he's got to have like a magician pass, he's got to scramble for like plus 10 yards, plus 20 yards. Like it's just like The guy's a freak. I mean,
Yeah,
realistically, you see it on the graphic here,
yeah.
he's putting up 2,538 yards, 24 touchdowns. He only has 5 interceptions so far this season, a 68.7 completion percentage, 190 yards rushing, and 3 rushing touchdowns. Just him. Like, to me, it's like if you just stopped his season here, that's a great season for any quarterback. Like, if you were to say, hey, like, you got to hang up your boots, like, that's a great season for any guy. And he's not even, he's just halfway done, a little over halfway done. We've got 4 games left, I think. And it's just like, and again, I'm not trying to jinx this game, but I mean, I would not be surprised if Cam Ward went for 400 yards, 450 yards against FSU. I mean, and just knowing Mario and kind of what he knows what this stage means for Cam Ward. I mean, because let's face it, this is the biggest game for us this season, even though it's not going to be as sexy as it normally is. But to go against your rival, to put up 300 your usual 300 plus yards, another 4 touchdowns, like or 3 touchdowns, like it's just, to me, I mean, it would be malpractice on the voters' part for them not to vote him in. I mean, Vegas already has the odds. What do they have him at? Plus 200. And him, it's just him and Ashton Genty from Boise State.
Boise
And
State.
don't get me wrong, I think Ashton Genty, what he's doing is incredible. Um, and I think he will beat Barry Sanders' yards season record for yards. But again, no offense to Boise State. I mean, it's Boise State. I mean, our schedule, don't get me wrong, is not that great, but we're gonna have to play Clemson. We're gonna make it to the college football playoff if we win out and we beat Clemson. Even if we don't beat Clemson, I still think we'll make it. Just the fact that Cam Ward has brought the U back to prominence in itself is enough. I think that's like, I feel like that is his like signature, like, hey, like, I'm going to beat my rival no matter what. I'm going to win these games out. But like, I took a program and again, I say this not in a derogatory sense, but I'll be real. Like, we have been insignificant for 2 decades compared to what we've been,
Yeah,
like what the standard at Miami we haven't even sniffed it. And this year we're finally playing football, and it looks like the teams that I grew up with. I mean, the defense is off, but I mean, the
yeah.
offense is just, I mean,
Offense
again,
is playing her. Yeah,
it's and realistically, okay, let's really kind of like think about this too. Like, I think we're becoming prisoners of the moment to a certain extent, because I think when we zoom out to 30,000 feet, we go through this season, we're going to see these close games. Yeah, they were close games, but people are not going to remember our defense. They're going to remember Cam Ward. And I think
yeah.
that alone is reason enough for him to win the Heisman. I mean, behind Ashton and Cam is Dylan Gabriel. And then like, he's like, I think Dylan Gabriel's at 350. But then you see like on the graphic, there's a steep drop off. I mean, Travis Hunter, because he's injured, is plus 1,500. And like, it just gets worse and worse and worse as you go down. So to me, it's like, I feel like Cam is the favorite. I feel like it's his to lose at this point. I'm seeing a lot of people push Ashton Genty, which is like really fueling that tinfoil theory of like the media hates Miami, because it's just like,
Of course.
why can't you just give this guy the credit? Give him his, because this is the funny thing too. It's like, even when Cam came to Miami, people who pay attention to the transfer portal and to recruiting and things like that all knew Cam was the prize for the transfer portal this season. Like, they knew he was the one. But when he signed with it was so underplayed. It was like, yeah, we'll see what happens. Okay, yeah, he'll be good. It wasn't like what we're seeing now. And I think the fan base, I mean, I won't speak for you, but you can jump in, but I had a feeling this was going to happen. Like, I knew when we got Cam, I'm like, this is what we're going to do. This is what this, because all he was missing was an O-line and some weapons around him, and he got them all. I mean, he got the royal flush, in terms of the hand he could have been handed. So
Yeah,
I guess we'll just have to like wait and see per usual. I think this week will solidify that. I think having a major win over your rival and really kind of giving Mario that retribution to where, yeah, he's right. Like, that's our job is to stop them. Their job is to score points. And now the shoe's going to be on the other foot. We're going to see what happens at the Rock on Saturday, but I expect it to be a great game. I expect to do a lot of cheering. I will probably throw my shoulder out cheering so hard and giving everyone high fives. And we will be checking back in with you guys on Sunday. But there is actually other games being played around the country. So let's take a dive real quick into the SEC, Rudy. Texas last week lost to Georgia in a stunning fashion. I thought Texas would keep it much closer than what they did. I did not see Georgia doing that, but that was the Georgia team I think we've all been waiting to see. I mean, they didn't look that great offensively, but the defense, I mean, we were texting during the game and I was like, is their defense for real? Like, I think this is for real. Like, we got to the first quarter and I was like, second quarter, I'm like, yeah. After the second quarter, I was like, yeah, this team is legit. What did you think of the game?
Shame on me. I picked Texas to win because we've seen how
Yeah.
Georgia was struggling offensively. And don't get me wrong, Georgia didn't look great offensively in the game, like you said. And, they had some early turnovers that I thought was going to punish them more. It didn't, because they forced turnovers. They turned Texas over worse than how Texas was forcing turnovers on Georgia. So, yeah, they looked great. And that's why they rose back up in the rankings the way that they did. And they doing it on the road after having that, loss against Alabama, then not looking good the past couple of games since. They made a statement. And it shows that they're back, and it looks like that Kirby Smart motivation where for him to be there and to say, like, one, the refs didn't want them to win the game,
Yeah.
but then two, he was probably with that narrative all week, telling the kids, like, look,
Oh, yeah.
nobody's giving us a chance. Everyone thinks we're done. They're basically doing the us against the world, circle the wagons.
Well, he comes from he comes from Saban University. He
Yep.
is a Saban acolyte. He knows exactly how to get his teams ready. He knows exactly the narrative to write and to draw out for his team. It's funny that you mentioned the officiating, because that defensive pass interference was questionable. I mean, I still side with Texas. I think it was a fair play. I didn't think it was a defensive pass interference, but the trash getting thrown, that was wild.
Look, if Kirby Smart and them want to complain about officiating, join the ACC.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
But I mean, I think
okay.
I mean, officiating across the board has been terrible. I mean, this season, like
Awful.
it's been horrific
Awful.
across the board. So, I mean, I'm not surprised that happened in that game. I thought, again, I watched that play and I watched it over and over, and I just don't know how Kirby saw that. And it was like, he just got upset about that. But the fans throwing the trash on, that was to where they had to stop the game. It was so bad. And then it's so funny. Like, I thought this was really like poignant, that like, it was like insult to injury. So like, first they lose the game, and then the SEC fines the school because of the trash incident, and like basically threatens them and says, like, boy, if you don't get your crowd under control, we will take away all these things. And oh, I just dropped out too. This is a good time. They were just like, boy, if you don't get your thing under control, we gonna fine you. And I was just like, okay, like this is the SEC letting Texas know what's up. And usually Texas is not used to being told what to do, which is
Yeah.
very unique. But
hey, they didn't even throw a flag. If this was Miami, they likely throw a flag, because look, there have been cases where Miami fans have thrown garbage on the field. It's happened in Florida State games in the past, because actually it happened in that 2016 game where Miami lost by the missed extra point, because there were so many terrible calls in that game that Miami fans took it under their own piece. And also, let's go back way back when Miami was first making their resurgence to glory in 2000. They're beating Michael Vick and Virginia Tech at home, and they start throwing oranges on the field because they're expecting to play for the Orange Bowl national championship. They got flagged for fans throwing oranges on the field.
it's not a show unless there's technical difficulties. You know what I mean? There's not a show till there's technical difficulties. You were saying about we were talking about the Texas game, and we were talking about the field, trash on the field. What were you saying about that, Rudy?
I'm surprised that they didn't have a flag thrown in that game, because it's one thing to find some game, but look, as Miami fans, we've seen stuff get thrown on the field and there's an immediate flag that affects the actual game in action. So it showed a lot of restraint. I'm kind of glad they didn't do it, but again, it's about consistency and officiating across conferences. So yeah, I found that pretty wild. At the same time too, like, guys, we're past this. At least it should be. It was the student section, so 20-year-olds don't know any better. That's why it was all accumulating in that one area. For player safety, that's always a big problem.
Yeah, and I just again, I just like, what are you gonna do? It's like why are you throwing stuff? I mean, if it was the last play of the game, I would understand it because there's no harm, no foul. But like, if your team's still trying to stay in the game, it's like just let it go. But I'm not sure if you saw. So Texas now they play Vandy this week, which is going to be a very interesting game because Vandy a few weeks ago beat Alabama, who they were never supposed to beat at home. But I'm not sure if you've seen this. Vanderbilt has erected this massive net where the visiting team is going to sit just to prevent this from happening again. Do you think Vandy can pull a double upset this season on Texas?
It's been a weird season. They play when they were successful against Bama. They were doing it, physically at the line of scrimmage. They were playing ball control offense. It's possible, but at the same time, regarding the Nets, you showed them to me. I never want to hear any criticism anymore of South American football for the rest of my life. I don't want to hear anything about how it's do and it's a bunch of it's third world stuff, because that's the kind of stuff you see in Argentine soccer stadiums that
Right.
keeps the fans like rushing onto the field after goals and throwing things on. Congratulations, Nashville, Tennessee, you're officially third world now. So I don't want to hear it.
Well, their poor stadium is like half being built, half like normal. It's terrible. Like I think they have like a whole end zone that's literally under construction, which is wild. Yeah,
Yep.
I don't think I just listen. I believe in Diego Pavia. I love the story of Diego Pavia. Um, I just don't know. But we know who Bama is, and I think we know who Texas is, and they're not the same. So I think Texas comes out of Nashville with the win. I think Vandy's Cinderella season kind of ends this weekend, but who knows? We'll see. But there's another game in the SEC that's going to happen that no one, I think, week one, thought was going to have any relevance in the SEC, which is LSU versus Texas A&M. Both teams losing their openers, their season openers, to out of conference play. Again, they're both at the top of the SEC right now, which is mind blowing. Like again, LSU, yes, Texas A&M, they've always fallen short of their standards, but this season again, we thought it was be the three-headed beast of Bama, Georgia, Texas, right? But here comes LSU and Texas A&M sneaking their win, undefeated in conference play. Who do you got in this one, LSU or Texas A&M?
This is so tough because they both look like different teams from that first week loss.
Yeah.
Texas A&M not looking great against Notre Dame at home. LSU not looking great against USC in a neutral site. They both have some good wins. They both have some wins where this kind of get by and get some help, because LSU escaped
Oof.
South Carolina with a win when a lot of people thought that South Carolina should have won that game.
And they're playing at
Uh,
Kyle Field
where is
too.
that being played again?
Kyle Field.
I got the solely because it's Kyle Field. I'm going to say it's the
Same.
Aggies. If this is in Death
Yeah.
Valley, I'd probably go with LSU. But
Yeah, and we,
just
we
because
know.
it's one of those making the line on this. This is like what without knowing the line, because I've been sequestered in St. Louis, aggressively training for the past week. I would guess that the line is like Texas A&M by 3,
Yep, it's
like
exactly
minus
what it
3.
is. Yep, it's exactly what it is.
That that
Do you work in Vegas? Do you work in Vegas, Rudy?
they don't. The home team always gets the advantage by at least. It's good for at least 3 points. So
Three
I
points, yeah.
will. That's yeah.
Yeah, I think Nussmeier's playing. I mean, he's not playing great. He's kind of like the quarterback version of our defense. It's like he's not good, but he's not completely terrible. Like it's like, you know what I mean? It's like I wouldn't say he's a good quarterback, but he's a great game manager. And I think just everyone is still high off that LSU Ole Miss game of him bringing them back in the fashion that he did. That they're just like, oh, that's fine. I don't get it. But yeah, I think playing at Kyle Field, I think also, what time is this game at? I want to see this really quick, because I think it's a 7:30 game too. Yeah, I got to give it to Texas A&M. I can't see that. I can't see them losing. They play Texas A&M plays well at home no matter what, but at night they play especially well. And you get them Texans a full day of tailgating. Let me tell you something. That place gets rowdy. Rowdy. That was actually
Yep.
that was the market I worked in when I worked in Texas. College Station was like a auxiliary market for the station I worked at. I had to go to College Station quite a few times. And that place, they bleed that maroon.
2 big home games.
Yeah. And so it's like, yeah, I have I have Texas A&M winning this as well. I mean, who knows? We'll see, but I think that here's a bigger question. Do you think the winner of this game is basically a shoo-in to go to Atlanta?
They're in the driver's seat, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't looked at like what their schedules look like for the rest of the time. Like, doesn't A&M has to play Texas like, at some point, don't they?
Yep. Texas has to play. They have to play. Let's see who they play really quick. So they play LSU, then they play South Carolina, who's been playing really great. They have New Mexico State,
Yeah.
garbage, Auburn, garbage, and then Texas. So yeah, I mean, literally, they're in the driver's seat if they
Yeah.
win, and then LSU. Who do they play? They've got Texas A&M. They've got Bama. Oof, that's a brutal schedule. Bama, then Florida. I mean, who knows how that goes? Vanderbilt, and then they finish the season with Oklahoma, so they'll win that game. But yeah, I don't know, man. The SEC is. I can't even really remember a year where the SEC was this wide open. Can you?
Yeah.
When was it?
No, I mean, I haven't seen it like this since like really pre Bama dominance and probably
Yeah,
pre like Tim Tebow Florida in terms
yeah,
of just being absolutely wide open where there's like multiple teams because you're like
yeah,
we're talking now LSU, Texas A&M, Bama's kind of out of it already. I would think with the two losses, but
yeah. I mean,
you
you
never
have you
well
have you have Georgia, Tennessee, Missouri. I mean, Missouri's garbage. Texas, Vanderbilt, all with one loss, right? You have Georgia, Tennessee,
yeah,
Missouri, Texas, and Vanderbilt, all with one loss. I mean, an LSU or Texas A&M with one loss. I mean, it's like one, two,
yeah,
three, four, five, six, seven, 8 teams. I mean, we're gonna figure out, Vanderbilt and Texas this week, but I mean, still, like that's 6, 7 teams that are still in the race going into November. Which, like I said, pre-Urban, pre-Nick Saban, I just that's the last time I remember because it was like Urban had a chokehold on the SEC when he was there, and then he handed it off to Nick Saban, who's had it for the last 2 decades basically, and then Kirby's basically had it for the last 3 years with Nick. So it's been an interesting year. I mean, this is to me. I mean, we talked about it a few weeks ago. This is the wildest year in college football by far. I feel like. I mean, look at us. I mean, out of nowhere. Look at us. Look at the you.
who'd have thought?
Right. Then we got the let's go to the Big Ten really quick. We've got Illinois versus Oregon, Washington versus Indiana. Indiana is my Cinderella favorite story. Love these guys. Hate the fact that their quarterback is out because this is the reason why I put this game up here for us to talk about is because I think in any other circumstance it would have been Indiana, you know, by a mile. But I mean, their backup quarterback is pretty good. He led them I think they were up 21-0 against Nebraska when their starter went out, and then their backup got them another 30 points or whatever it was they destroyed Nebraska with. So he's proven, but I don't know. What do you think, Washington and Indiana?
Remind me, who are they going out to Seattle or is Washington coming to them?
Washington is coming to them. Yeah.
I'll take the Hoosiers again because it's one. I don't think Washington travels very well. It's just something that they're not quite playing at that level yet. They're not quite cohesive.
Yeah. And it's a
They
noon
haven't.
game. Oof.
Yeah,
That's going to be early for them. That'll be like a 9 a.m. game for Washington.
it's what one of my best friends likes to call the token Big Ten noon game, the TBTNG. It's one good one every single week. It's this one, so I'll take Indiana.
Yeah, I now that we're talking through this, I want to do it. Yeah, I think I'm going to go Indiana as well. What about this Illinois Oregon game going on? Illinois. I mean, again, Brett Bielema. He's going to Brett Bielema, so I'm not expecting him to go undefeated. But I mean, Illinois is phenomenal this year. I mean, who would have thunk, right?
They look good, but I have too much faith in this Oregon team, especially after beating Ohio State. And Dan Lanning's got them, cooking after those first couple of weeks where they struggled against the state of Idaho, and they haven't struggled since. I'm going Oregon, and I cannot stand Brett Bielema because when he was the head coach over at Wisconsin, just did not like his attitude, did not like his play style. I think he's kind of like they're successful this year at Illinois, but something that his teams have struggled with is that players just don't want to play for him. He's like the Hugh Freeze of the Big Ten. So it's good that everything's working right now, but if it goes south in a bad way. So I
Yeah.
think Oregon's downward spiral for the Illini.
Yeah, I think while Indiana's Cinderella story will continue till they meet the buzzsaw that is Ohio State, I think Illinois comes to a crashing halt this weekend. I think in Autzen, I mean, if Ohio State can't beat Oregon in Autzen, there's no way Illinois is going to beat them. And I
Nope.
think they're a 22 point underdog. So yeah, that's
Yeah,
yeah,
nobody's got
that's
faith if that a team with that good of a record going into Oregon. Granted, they're highly ranked. Yeah, that nope. Sorry.
yeah. So while we were putting this show together, I was struggling. I mean, I pulled some of these games out that I thought were interesting, but it really is kind of one of those weekends where you can kind of start going, okay, yeah, this is who's gonna win. Like Oklahoma's going to definitely lose to Ole Miss. Like Nebraska's going to get killed by Ohio State. But there are some sneaky games on the calendar. Let's look at the Big 12 first. You've got BYU, UCF. UCF, yes, is terrible. Yes, they're not good. They've literally taken our backup quarterback. What was his name? Ja'Cory Brown. That was his
Ja'Cory
name?
Brown. Yeah.
Ja'Cory Brown. I always forget. Is it Ja'Cory or is it Ja'Cory? I don't know. But they got him playing. Who? It's funny. He can't throw a ball, but he can run. He's like, I think that they're their second best rusher on the team. But where I'm curious to see is it's BYU going to Orlando, and how does that
Bounce
affect them?
house.
You know what I mean? And the UCF. I think the only away game I ever went to was a UCF game. We played UCF one year. And they
Yeah, it
get
was
loud.
2010 or something.
Yeah, they get lit. Like that place, it's on campus. It's an erector set as well. And they really know how to party there. I mean, it's a 3:30 game, so it's gonna be hot. And my worry for BYU is that humidity. I mean, we haven't even entered remotely our cool months yet. And them boys from Utah, I don't know if they're gonna be ready for that heat. What do you think?
I just think it's a size thing. I mean, because BYU plays such a physical style of football,
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think UCF can stick with that. This isn't the 2017 national champion lineup anymore. They're not putting up points explosively anymore. They struggle to move the ball on offense, and their defense is kind of fallen off a little bit. They're good for like making runs because they've. Don't get me wrong. They've pulled out some victories that you didn't think that they were going to be able to even have a chance, and they've gotten close a couple of times in losses where that game looked like it was a blowout all of like 5 minutes before. I think BYU's got too much. I think they
Yeah.
play too physical style. I don't think they let teams back in like that. So even though they don't have the momentum of home field, it doesn't matter in this case. So
Yeah,
I'm going Cougar.
Yeah, I joked earlier this season. I was like, BYU is kind of like the Clemson of the Big 12, or like the West Coast, like the West Coast Clemson. Like every year they do really well. Like they're always like 6-0, 7-0, but then they have this game where they stub their toe and they lose, and you're just like, there goes BYU doing BYU
The
things,
Mormon Clemson.
Yeah, they are the Mormon Clemson. That's perfect. I love that. That
Church
that
of
was
Latter
actually
Day Clemson.
the Church of Latter-day Clemson. Yeah,
Yeah.
if they were realistically, this is the only game I realistically see them slipping up on, because if they're going to do anything, it's just because, and maybe Arizona State, maybe, but the rest of their schedule is super manageable. And again, the only reason why I would say this would be closer than the experts think is just because of the travel. It being a 3:30 game, that means it's like roughly, like for the mountain time, what is that? Like 1 o'clock, 12 o'clock, just like
1:30.
a
Yeah.
noon game, and
1:30.
then it's gonna be hot and humid. And that really does. I mean, people don't like to like admit it, but it does take a toll on teams. But I do think, like you said, I think BYU is just, they're too powerful. Let's jump over to the group of five really quick. So we saw Liberty go down to Kennesaw State, which to me was wild. Like 5-0 team playing a 0-6 team, and you're favored by like 26.5 points, and you lose. Like, goodbye. You're now completely irrelevant because you're Liberty. And not only that, but like you were saying, what were you saying about their alignment again, Rudy? While we were off air?
Oh, not fair. Like, don't get me wrong. This is like one of the pretenders where if you looked at like the entire undefeateds, some teams have struggled, like, Miami, but this is a team that they look like a basketball team. Like their
Yeah.
offensive lineman in size is like watching another team's like running backs. Like
Yeah.
that's how undersized. And when you're
They,
playing, in the wrong, like it's nice to see like the basketball term of like mid-major, like group of five teams do well. But this is one of those that if they were able to run the table and actually get like a bid into the college football playoff, this is one of those where you go, why is this even a matchup? Because they're going to get
yeah.
absolutely annihilated by this. And the fact they lost to 0-6 Kennesaw State, who's been playing, Division One college football for all of like what 6 years,
Yeah.
that's enough said right
It's
there.
their first FBS win. It's the first time Kennesaw State has ever beaten an FBS team. Like you could not lose in poorer fashion. And it's funny because like every time I see Liberty, like I think the last 2 years, like the Liberty Flames, and I'm like, this team looks like St. Thomas Aquinas. Like it looks like American
Yep.
Heritage. Like I look at them and I'm like, I would put American Heritage against them and be like, who's going to win that game? like seriously.
Any of these big high school programs. Yeah.
Yeah, like any of them.
It's
IMG,
wild.
I'm like they and I just don't understand. I'm glad Kennesaw State did their thing. I love hearing stories like this, especially when we're not involved in it. Of us like a team that just like a complete underdog just making it happen. Don't think that's gonna happen for FSU. So FSU fans, please do not take liberty in this. Do not take.
Speaking of when it doesn't happen to us, just like last night's game, a couple of years ago, Miami got waxed by Middle Tennessee, and then watching them get absolutely annihilated by Rich Rodriguez in Jacksonville State. That's now in FBS.
I took my son to his first game last year, and it was that Middle Tennessee game, thinking that we were gonna win. And I can't tell you, like, I just was like, I felt like I did a disservice to my son. I was like, I've scarred you. Luckily, he's definitely not going to remember it at all. But I was just like,
Good.
oh man, they do a great thing though. Fun fact. So if anyone's watching this and you got kids, if you can get to the club level, they have like a really cool thing where they give you like a sign and they take a picture for you and you can get a picture with Sebastian if it's your first game, if your kid's first game. So UM's really good at that. So props to UM for doing that. Back to the football. Another game I thought was going to be really interesting, and we've been waiting for this game all year, and there's one more rendition of it coming up in a few weeks, but the first one, part one, is Navy versus Notre Dame. So the service academies, both Navy and Army, are undefeated. They're having spectacular seasons. Navy led by their dual threat quarterback, Horvath, who is just, and for Navy, again, I'm not saying, college football in general, but this guy's legit. What do you think about this Navy Notre Dame matchup? Do you have an inclination of who you think will win?
Yeah. Look, I was wrong on the Stanford prediction, but I think it's a similar style. The thing about the service academies that they're doing so well with now is that they're not just running that triple option offense anymore. They're adding a lot more pass elements to it. They're running more of like a spread option and taking advantage of RPO plays.
Mm-hmm.
Navy's in the top 25. They play physical football. They're a team that's going to be disciplined just by the fact that they're a service academy, so they're not going to put up like 12 penalties in a game. I think they win.
Yeah.
I don't. Notre Dame has looked good against good competition outside of that win over Texas A&M. So Navy's beaten them in the past.
Yeah, they have.
I think they're going to beat them again.
I do too. I think they're playing at MetLife. I think they're playing in New York. It's a noon game. I think Notre Dame's been riddled with injuries too. I'm not sure if you've been paying attention to that at all. Like Notre Dame is really, really hurting. And so I think with the injuries, it being a noon game, they're on the road, and Navy is just clicking. Like to me, I'm just like, these guys got everything it takes. I mean, if Notre Dame does win this game, I think it'll just be one of those things where Riley just caught a really hot hand, and because they're running really well. Notre Dame's running the ball really well, and Riley hasn't really been a factor. Well, yeah, but I think if Notre Dame can pull this out, it's because Riley has like a really stellar game. Like he goes like, I don't know, like 25 for like 34 with like 280 yards. Like he's got to have like a stellar game, because again, Navy's defense is also really good too. Like they're stout. So I mean, we'll see. I think Navy as well. I'm gonna pick Navy. I feel good with Navy. Well, Rudy, technical errors out of the way, we have made it to the end of another episode. I want to thank everyone for watching. Until next week, be good, y'all. Win the weekend. And of course, go Canes. It's rivalry week. Let's go Canes! I'm ready for it. We'll see you guys on Sunday or Monday, depending on how excited we are, to do a recap of the FSU UM games. Thank you guys for sticking to the end. I normally would never do this, but if you could like, comment, and subscribe on the video, it would really help us out a lot. We want to thank all the viewers who have made it this far. And we'll see you guys for the recap.